Welcome back to Shocking Stories, where we uncover the most disturbing true crime cases that will shatter your faith in humanity and make you question the people you trust most. I'm your host, and today we're heading to the quiet suburban streets of Westerville, Ohio, where for 10 years, the sound of turkey in the straw, playing from a colorful ice cream truck brought joy to children and parents alike. But what families thought was innocent childhood magic was actually the hunting ground for one of Ohio's most prolific child predators. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will make you think twice about every friendly face in your neighborhood and question whether the people who seem the most trustworthy might actually be hiding the darkest secrets. This is the story of Robert "Bobby" Henderson, a 54-year-old man whose cheerful demeanor and genuine love for children made him a beloved figure in Westerville's family-friendly neighborhoods. For a decade, Bobby's rainbow-colored ice cream truck was a source of pure joy for local kids. But investigators would eventually discover that his mobile business was actually a sophisticated hunting operation that allowed him to identify, stalk, and abduct children while maintaining the perfect cover of a harmless community fixture. Picture this. It's a warm summer afternoon in June 2019 in the estates of Westerville, an upscale suburban development where tree-lined streets are filled with children riding bikes, playing hopscotch, and eagerly waiting for the familiar melody that signals Bobby's arrival. At exactly 3:30 p.m. every weekday, perfectly timed for when kids get home from school, Bobby's ice cream truck would appear like clockwork, its speakers playing cheerful jingles that could be heard from blocks away. Bobby Henderson was exactly what Central Casting would order for a friendly neighborhood ice cream man. At 5 feet 8 inches with graying hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a genuine smile that reached his eyes, Bobby looked like everyone's favorite uncle. He knew every child's name, remembered their favorite flavors, and often gave free ice cream to kids whose families were going through tough times. Parents trusted him completely, often sending their children out alone with pocket money to buy treats from the man they viewed as a harmless community treasure. Bobby was like a member of our extended family, recalled Jennifer Martinez, whose 8-year-old daughter Emma was one of Bobby's regular customers. He knew all the kids' birthdays, would ask about their school projects, and genuinely seemed to care about their lives. My daughter loved him like a grandfather. The idea that someone so kind and gentle could hurt children, it's something I still can't fully process. Bobby's ice cream truck operation appeared to be a legitimate small business that served multiple neighborhoods throughout Westerville and surrounding suburbs. His truck was meticulously maintained, his permits were always current, and he followed all local regulations about where and when he could operate. To everyone who knew him, Bobby Henderson was the epitome of an honest, hard-working small business owner who brought happiness to children while earning a modest living. But beneath Bobby's wholesome exterior was a calculating predator who had spent years perfecting a system for identifying vulnerable children and gaining access to them without raising suspicion. His ice cream truck wasn't just a business. It was a mobile surveillance unit that allowed him to study neighborhoods, map family routines, and build detailed profiles of potential victims. Bobby had turned being an ice cream man into the perfect cover for predatory behavior, explained Detective Sarah Chen of the Delaware County Sheriff's Office, who would eventually lead the investigation into Bobby's crimes. He had legitimate reasons to be in every neighborhood, to interact with children, and to learn intimate details about families' schedules and routines. Parents saw him as harmless and trustworthy, which gave him unprecedented access to potential victims. The first sign that something might be wrong came in September 2019, when 7-year-old Marcus Thompson disappeared from his front yard in Westerville while waiting for Bobby's ice cream truck. Marcus's mother, Linda Thompson, had given him $5 and told him he could buy ice cream when he heard the familiar jingles approaching their street. "I was inside making dinner and could hear the ice cream truck music getting closer," Linda recalled during her tearful interview with investigators. Marcus was so excited. He had been saving his allowance all week to buy one of those expensive ice cream bars shaped like a superhero. When I looked out the window 5 minutes later to check on him, he was gone. The ice cream truck was gone too, and Marcus was nowhere to be found. The initial search for Marcus involved the entire Westerville community. Hundreds of volunteers combed through neighborhoods, parks, and wooded areas, while police interviewed residents and checked security cameras throughout the area. Bobby Henderson was among the first people to join the search efforts, appearing genuinely distraught about Marcus's disappearance and offering to help in any way he could. Bobby seemed as concerned as any parent, Detective Chen remembered. He volunteered to drive his truck slowly through neighborhoods while playing his music, hoping that Marcus might hear it and come running if he was lost or hiding. He appeared to be doing everything possible to help find the missing boy. But as the investigation continued, detectives began to notice some troubling inconsistencies in Bobby's account of his movements on the day Marcus disappeared. Bobby claimed he had never made it to the Thompson family street that afternoon because his truck had broken down several blocks away, but witnesses reported hearing ice cream truck music in the area around the time Marcus vanished. When we asked Bobby about the discrepancy, he seemed confused and said he must have been mistaken about which streets he had covered that day, Detective Chen explained. He said he had been driving the same routes for so many years that sometimes the days blended together in his memory. It seemed like an innocent explanation from someone who was genuinely trying to help. Marcus Thompson was never found, despite an extensive search that continued for weeks. The case eventually went cold, with investigators unable to find any concrete evidence about what had happened to the 7-year-old boy. The community was devastated, but life gradually returned to normal, including Bobby's regular ice cream truck visits, which parents viewed as a comforting return to routine after the trauma of Marcus's disappearance. What families didn't know was that Marcus Thompson had been just the beginning of a pattern that would claim several more young victims over the following months. Bobby had spent years perfecting his methods, and Marcus's successful abduction had given him the confidence to accelerate his activities. The second disappearance occurred in February 2020, when 6-year-old Isabella Rodriguez vanished from a playground in nearby Delaware, Ohio, while playing with friends after school. Several children reported seeing Isabella talking to the ice cream man near his truck before she disappeared, but none of the adults supervising the playground had noticed anything unusual. Isabella was playing on the swings with her best friend when they heard the ice cream truck music, recalled playground supervisor Maria Santos. The friend said Isabella ran toward the truck because she had money her grandmother had given her for ice cream. When we realized Isabella wasn't back after 15 minutes, we went looking for her. The ice cream truck was gone, and so was Isabella. Bobby Henderson again appeared to be a concerned community member who wanted to help find the missing child. He participated in search parties, distributed missing person flyers, and even offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to Isabella's safe return. His apparent concern and willingness to help seemed to prove his innocence to everyone involved. But Detective Chen was beginning to see a troubling pattern. 2 children had disappeared in circumstances involving ice cream trucks, and while Bobby had alibis and explanations for both incidents, the coincidences were becoming difficult to ignore. I started looking at missing children cases throughout Central Ohio and discovered something that made my blood run cold, Detective Chen revealed. Over the past 5 years, there had been at least 12 cases of children disappearing in circumstances that involved ice cream trucks or children being seen near ice cream vendors shortly before vanishing. What Detective Chen discovered would transform the investigation from a series of isolated missing children cases into one of the most extensive child predator investigations in Ohio history. The missing children weren't random victims. They were the result of a systematic hunting operation that had been conducted under the cover of a legitimate ice cream business. But identifying Bobby Henderson as a potential suspect was just the beginning of an investigation that would reveal the full scope of his decade-long crime spree and expose the sophisticated methods he had used to evade detection while preying on the children who trusted him most. The investigation into Bobby Henderson's potential involvement in the missing children cases began in earnest in March 2020, when Detective Chen assembled a task force of investigators from multiple law enforcement agencies. The task force included specialists in child abduction cases, digital forensics experts, and surveillance teams trained in monitoring potential predators without alerting them to the investigation. We had to be incredibly careful in how we approached the Bobby Henderson investigation, Detective Chen explained. If he was responsible for the missing children and we tipped him off to our suspicions, he might flee, destroy evidence, or worse, harm any victims he might be holding captive. The first phase of the investigation involved comprehensive background checks on Bobby Henderson and analysis of his business records, financial transactions, and personal history. What investigators found was a man whose life appeared to be exactly what it seemed on the surface. A quiet, single man who had been operating his ice cream truck business for over 15 years. Bobby lived alone in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of Westerville, where he had resided for the past 20 years. He had no criminal record, no history of complaints or suspicious behavior, and appeared to be a model citizen who paid his taxes, maintained his property, and contributed to local charities. His ice cream truck business was properly licensed and insured, and he had never been cited for violations or inappropriate conduct. On paper, Bobby Henderson was the most boring, law-abiding citizen you could imagine, Detective Chen observed. He had no red flags in his background, no criminal history, and no obvious signs of the kind of psychological problems we typically see in child predators. If we hadn't identified the pattern of missing children connected to ice cream trucks, he never would have come to our attention. But the investigation took a disturbing turn when forensic accountants analyzing Bobby's financial records discovered some unusual patterns in his business expenses and cash flow. Despite operating what appeared to be a small-scale ice cream truck business, Bobby was spending large amounts of money on equipment, supplies, and services that didn't seem related to selling frozen treats to children. Bobby was spending thousands of dollars on things like soundproofing materials, industrial refrigeration equipment, security cameras, and electronic surveillance devices, explained FBI financial analyst Robert Kim, who was brought in to examine Bobby's records. He was also making regular payments to storage facilities, construction contractors, and suppliers of materials that had no obvious connection to an ice cream business. The financial analysis suggested that Bobby's ice cream truck operation was just one part of a much larger and more complex criminal enterprise. He appeared to be maintaining multiple facilities, purchasing specialized equipment, and investing in infrastructure that would be necessary for holding people against their will for extended periods. The breakthrough in the investigation came when surveillance teams following Bobby's daily routes discovered that he was making regular stops at locations that weren't part of his normal ice cream truck schedule. In addition to his publicized neighborhood routes, Bobby was visiting remote rural properties, storage facilities, and industrial buildings where he would spend hours at a time. Bobby had a double life, Detective Chen revealed. During the day, he was the cheerful ice cream man serving children in suburban neighborhoods. But several times per week, he would drive to remote locations where he was conducting activities that had nothing to do with selling ice cream. One of Bobby's secret locations was a storage facility in rural Delaware County, where he rented 3 large units under false names. When investigators obtained warrants to search the units, they found evidence that would confirm their worst fears about what Bobby Henderson had been doing to the missing children. The storage units contained what could only be described as a child imprisonment operation. The units had been modified with reinforced walls, ventilation systems, and soundproofing that would prevent anyone inside from being heard from outside. There were sleeping areas, bathroom facilities, and even entertainment systems that suggested the spaces were being used to hold people for extended periods. Bobby had created miniature prison cells disguised as storage units, Detective Chen explained with disgust. The facilities were designed to hold multiple children simultaneously, with separate spaces that would prevent them from communicating with each other or coordinating any kind of escape attempt. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery was a collection of detailed records that Bobby had been keeping about each child he had targeted. The files contained photographs, personal information, family schedules, and behavioral observations that showed Bobby had been systematically stalking children for months before abducting them. Bobby didn't choose his victims randomly, Detective Chen continued. He spent months studying each child, learning their routines, identifying their vulnerabilities, and planning the perfect moment to take them. He had files on dozens of children who had been potential targets, including many who had never been reported missing. The investigation revealed that Bobby's decade-long crime spree had been far more extensive than investigators had initially imagined. The missing children cases that had triggered the investigation were just a fraction of his total victims. Bobby had been abducting children throughout central Ohio, holding them captive in his modified storage units, and then disposing of them when he tired of them or when they became too difficult to control. Like this video if you're as horrified by Bobby's systematic approach to child abduction as I am, and let me know in the comments what you think should happen to monsters like Bobby Henderson. Don't forget to subscribe because in part 2, We're going to reveal what investigators found when they raided Bobby's secret facilities, and uncover the full scope of his crimes against the innocent children who trusted him. The truth about the ice cream truck killer will leave you speechless and make you understand why some evil is too dark to comprehend. Welcome back to Shocking Stories. When we left off, investigators had discovered that Bobby Henderson, Westerville's beloved ice cream man, was operating secret facilities where he was holding abducted children captive. What they found when they raided those locations would expose one of the most systematic and horrific child abuse operations in Ohio history, and reveal that the cheerful music of Bobby's ice cream truck had been masking screams that no one could hear. The coordinated raids on Bobby Henderson's secret facilities began at dawn on April 15, 2020, with teams of federal agents, local police, and child rescue specialists descending simultaneously on 6 different locations throughout central Ohio. The operation, codenamed Sweet Dreams, was one of the largest child rescue operations ever conducted in the state. "We had to move quickly and simultaneously on all of Bobby's locations," explained FBI Special Agent Jennifer Martinez, who coordinated the federal response to the case. "If Bobby realized we were onto him, he might harm any children he was holding or destroy evidence that could help us identify additional victims." The first location raided was Bobby's residence, a modest ranch house that neighbors described as well-maintained and unremarkable. But when agents breached the front door, they discovered that the house's ordinary exterior concealed a nightmare that had been hidden for years. The house looked completely normal from the outside, but Bobby had converted most of the interior into what could only be described as a child prison, Agent Martinez revealed. The basement had been divided into multiple cells with reinforced doors, security cameras, and restraint systems. Upstairs rooms had been soundproofed and equipped with monitoring equipment that allowed Bobby to watch his victims constantly. But the most shocking discovery at Bobby's house was that he was currently holding 3 children captive, victims who had been missing for months but whom investigators hadn't connected to Bobby's crimes. Emma Garcia, 8, had disappeared from a Columbus playground in January 2020. Tyler Johnson, 7, had vanished from his backyard in Westerville in March 2020. And Sarah Kim, 9, had been reported missing from a Delaware shopping center just 2 weeks before the raids. "Finding those 3 children alive was a miracle," Agent Martinez said with emotion. "They had been held captive for months, subjected to unimaginable abuse and trauma, but they were alive. That discovery gave our entire team hope that we might find other survivors at Bobby's other locations." The children were immediately transported to hospitals for medical evaluation and treatment, while child psychologists began the delicate process of interviewing them about their experiences. What they revealed would provide crucial evidence about Bobby's methods and help investigators understand the full scope of his criminal operation. "The children told us that Bobby had been systematically abusing them while pretending to be their caregiver," explained Dr. Patricia Moore, the child psychologist who worked with the survivors. "He had created an elaborate fantasy where he was rescuing them from their families and providing them with a better life. He forced them to participate in this delusion while subjecting them to physical and psychological abuse that was designed to break their resistance and make them compliant." The children also revealed that Bobby had shown them videos and photographs of other children who had been held in the same facilities, suggesting that his crimes had been ongoing for years and involved many more victims than investigators had initially suspected. "Bobby had documented his crimes extensively," Dr. Moore continued. "He had shown the children videos of previous victims as a way of threatening them and demonstrating what would happen if they didn't cooperate. The children were able to provide descriptions of dozens of other victims who had been held in the same facilities over the years. While the rescue team worked to treat the surviving children, other agents were conducting searches of Bobby's storage facilities and workshop areas. What they found there would provide evidence of the true extent of Bobby's decade-long crime spree and reveal the systematic nature of his child abuse operation. The storage units that Bobby had rented under false names contained what investigators described as child processing centers, facilities designed to hold multiple children simultaneously while Bobby subjected them to various forms of abuse and exploitation. Each unit had been carefully modified with ventilation systems, plumbing, and security measures that would allow Bobby to keep children captive for extended periods without detection. Bobby had essentially created a network of private prisons where he could hold children indefinitely, Agent Martinez explained. The facilities were designed with backup systems, multiple security measures, and even medical equipment that would allow him to treat injuries or illnesses without seeking outside help. But the most disturbing discovery was a collection of recordings and photographs that Bobby had made of his victims over the years. The evidence showed that Bobby's crimes weren't limited to kidnapping and imprisonment. He had been systematically abusing the children and creating material that he was selling to other predators online. Bobby was running a commercial child abuse operation, Agent Martinez revealed with disgust. He wasn't just abusing children for his own gratification. He was producing and distributing content to a network of other predators, generating significant income from the exploitation of his victims. The digital forensics investigation revealed that Bobby had been part of an international network of child predators who shared victims, methods, and material through encrypted communications channels. Bobby's ice cream truck operation had made him particularly valuable to the network because it allowed him to identify and access potential victims more easily than other predators. Bobby was considered an asset by the International Predator Network because of his unique access to children, explained FBI cybercrime specialist Dr. Lisa Chen. His ice cream truck gave him legitimate reasons to be around children, to interact with them regularly, and to learn about their families and routines. Other network members were paying Bobby to identify potential victims and provide detailed intelligence about children in his area. The investigation revealed that Bobby had been receiving payments from predators in multiple countries who were interested in obtaining children with specific characteristics or backgrounds. Bobby would identify children who matched these specifications, conduct surveillance to learn about their vulnerabilities, and then plan abductions that would provide the children to his criminal associates. Bobby was essentially running a child trafficking operation disguised as an ice cream business, Agent Martinez explained. He was taking custom orders for children with specific physical characteristics, ages, or backgrounds, and then fulfilling those orders by abducting kids from his regular routes. As investigators analyzed Bobby's records and communications, they began to understand the full scope of his criminal network and the number of children who had been victimized over the past decade. The evidence suggested that Bobby had personally abducted at least 30 children, and had provided intelligence that led to the abduction of dozens more by his criminal associates. Bobby's victim count was staggering, Detective Chen reflected. For 10 years, he had been systematically identifying, stalking, and abducting children throughout central Ohio. Some of the children had been sold to other predators, some had been held at his facilities for extended periods, and some had been killed when they became too difficult to control or posed a security risk. But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the investigation was discovering how Bobby had used his position as a trusted community figure to gain access to his victims. Parents had unknowingly helped Bobby identify vulnerable children by sharing information about their families, schedules, and personal circumstances during casual conversations when they bought ice cream. Bobby was incredibly skilled at extracting information from parents without them realizing what he was doing, Dr. Moore observed. He would ask innocent-seeming questions about children's activities, school schedules, family situations, and personal interests. Parents thought they were just making friendly conversation with their neighborhood ice cream man, but they were actually providing Bobby with intelligence he used to plan abductions. The investigation also revealed that Bobby had been using his ice cream truck routes to conduct surveillance on potential victims for months before actually abducting them. He would carefully study children's routines, identify times when they were most vulnerable, and plan elaborate abduction scenarios that would minimize the chances of being caught. Bobby treated child abduction like a military operation, Agent Martinez observed. He would spend months planning each abduction, studying the target's routines, identifying escape routes, and developing contingency plans. His success rate was so high because he never acted impulsively. Every abduction was carefully planned and executed. The evidence recovered from Bobby's facilities also revealed that he had been documenting his crimes extensively, keeping detailed records of each victim, their treatment, and ultimately their disposal. The records showed a pattern of escalating violence and a complete lack of empathy for the children he was victimizing. Bobby's records read like a business ledger, Agent Martinez said with revulsion. He documented each child's acquisition, the services they provided to his criminal network, and their eventual disposal when they were no longer useful. He had completely dehumanized these children and viewed them as nothing more than commodities to be bought, sold, and discarded. As investigators worked to identify all of Bobby's victims and notify their families, they faced the heartbreaking task of telling parents that their missing children had been found, but that many of them would never be coming home. The evidence showed that Bobby had killed at least 15 children over the course of his criminal career, disposing of their bodies in remote locations throughout Ohio. Having to tell parents that we had found their child, but that their child was dead, was the most difficult part of this entire investigation, Detective Chen admitted. These families had been hoping and praying for years that their children would come home alive. Learning the truth about what Bobby had done to them was devastating beyond words. The investigation also revealed that Bobby had been planning to expand his operation and recruit other ice cream vendors to join his criminal network. His communications showed that he had been in contact with ice cream truck operators in other states, sharing his methods and encouraging them to begin identifying potential victims in their areas. Bobby was trying to franchise his child trafficking operation, Agent Martinez explained. He had developed a successful model for using ice cream trucks as cover for predatory activities, and he was working to replicate that model in other cities. If we hadn't stopped him when we did, his network could have expanded nationwide. As Part 2 of our investigation concludes, Bobby Henderson sits in federal custody awaiting trial on charges that could result in multiple life sentences or the death penalty. The 3 children rescued from his house are receiving intensive medical and psychological treatment, while investigators continue working to identify and recover the remains of his other victims. But the most disturbing revelation was still to come. As investigators dug deeper into Bobby's background and criminal network, they would discover that the ice cream truck killer had been operating as part of an even larger conspiracy, one that involved other trusted community figures and reached into the highest levels of local government. Don't miss Part 3, where we'll reveal the full scope of the conspiracy that protected Bobby Henderson for a decade, explore how the survivors are healing from their trauma, and examine how this case changed the way law enforcement approaches child predator investigations. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell, because the conclusion of Bobby's story will expose corruption and complicity that allowed these crimes to continue for far too long. Let me know in the comments what you think should happen to Bobby Henderson and anyone who helped him commit these crimes. And share this video to help raise awareness about the warning signs of predatory behavior and the importance of protecting our children from monsters who hide behind friendly facades. Welcome back to the shocking conclusion of our investigation into the ice cream truck killer. When we left off, Bobby Henderson had been arrested and 3 surviving children had been rescued from his house of horrors, but investigators suspected that his decade-long child trafficking operation couldn't have succeeded without help from others. What they discovered next would expose a network of corruption and complicity that reached into the highest levels of Westerville's government and law enforcement, revealing how a community's trust can be weaponized by those sworn to protect it. The investigation into Bobby Henderson's criminal network expanded dramatically when FBI digital forensics specialists analyzed the encrypted communications found on his computer systems. What they discovered was evidence of a conspiracy that involved multiple individuals in positions of authority who had been protecting Bobby's operation and helping him evade detection for years. Bobby wasn't operating alone, revealed FBI Special Agent Jennifer Martinez during a press conference that shocked the Ohio law enforcement community. He had been receiving protection and assistance from individuals within the local government and police department who were either being paid for their cooperation or were participants in his criminal network. The communications revealed that Bobby had been paying monthly bribes to several Westerville city officials in exchange for advance warning about potential investigations, help with permit issues, and protection from complaints about his activities. More disturbing still, the evidence showed that some of these officials were not just accepting bribes. They were active participants in Bobby's child trafficking operation. We discovered that Bobby had been providing children to several prominent Westerville residents, including a city councilman, a school board member, and 2 police officers, Agent Martinez continued. These individuals weren't just customers of Bobby's criminal enterprise. They were partners who helped him identify vulnerable children and provided him with inside information that allowed his operation to continue undetected. The first arrest in the conspiracy came on May 1, 2020, when FBI agents detained Westerville City Councilman Michael Thompson at his home. Thompson, who had been a vocal advocate for children's safety issues during his 8 years in office, was found to be in possession of child abuse material that had been produced at Bobby's facilities. Michael Thompson was one of Bobby's best customers, Agent Martinez revealed during Thompson's arraignment. He had been purchasing access to children through Bobby's network for over 5 years, and had even helped Bobby identify potential victims by using his position on the city council to access information about families receiving social services. Thompson's arrest was followed by the detention of Delaware County Sheriff's Deputy Robert Chen, who had been providing Bobby with information about missing children investigations and helping him stay ahead of law enforcement efforts. Deputy Chen had been the primary investigator on several of the missing children cases, and had deliberately misdirected investigations away from Bobby and toward false leads. Deputy Chen wasn't just failing to investigate Bobby properly, he was actively sabotaging the investigations, explained Delaware County Sheriff Patricia Moore, who had been brought in from outside the county to oversee the corruption investigation. He would take witness statements about ice cream trucks being involved in disappearances and then fail to follow up on those leads. He would delay forensic testing of evidence and would even provide false information to families about the status of investigations. But perhaps the most shocking arrest was that of Dr. Sarah Wilson, a respected child psychologist who had been working with the school district to identify children who might be at risk for abuse or neglect. Dr. Wilson had been using her professional access to vulnerable children to identify potential victims for Bobby's operation. Dr. Wilson was supposed to be protecting children from predators, Agent Martinez said with disgust. Instead, she was using her position of trust to identify children who were already vulnerable, kids from broken homes, children with developmental disabilities, kids whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed or thoroughly investigated. The investigation revealed that Dr. Wilson had been providing Bobby with detailed psychological profiles of potential victims, including information about their family situations, psychological vulnerabilities, and behavioral patterns that would make them easier to manipulate and control. Dr. Wilson essentially created shopping lists for Bobby, Agent Martinez continued. She would identify children who fit specific criteria, kids who were isolated, kids from unstable families, kids who were already experiencing trauma, and provide Bobby with all the information he needed to successfully target them. The investigation continued to unravel the conspiracy. They discovered that the network had been operating for over a decade and had connections to similar operations in other Ohio cities. Bobby's ice cream truck operation had been so successful that it had become a model for other child trafficking networks throughout the Midwest. What we discovered was that Bobby's operation wasn't unique, Agent Martinez revealed. There were at least 6 similar networks operating throughout Ohio, all using the same basic model of mobile vendors who could gain access to children while maintaining the protection of corrupt local officials. The trial of Bobby Henderson began in September 2021, 18 months after his arrest. The case attracted national media attention not just because of the horrific nature of Bobby's crimes, but because of the widespread corruption that had enabled his operation to continue for so long. The Bobby Henderson case represents one of the most comprehensive failures of our child protection systems that we've ever seen, prosecutor David Martinez told the jury during opening statements. This defendant didn't just abuse and kill children. He corrupted an entire community's system of government and law enforcement to protect his criminal operation. The prosecution's case was built around testimony from the 3 surviving children, forensic evidence from Bobby's facilities, and the extensive digital records that documented his crimes and his criminal network. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, painting a picture of systematic child abuse and trafficking that had been conducted with impunity for years. The evidence shows that Bobby Henderson was responsible for the abduction, abuse, and murder of at least 30 children over a 10-year period, prosecutor Martinez continued. He used his position as a trusted community figure to identify victims, and he used corruption and bribery to ensure that his crimes would never be properly investigated. Bobby's defense team, led by prominent criminal attorney Lisa Chen, faced an impossible task. The evidence against Bobby was overwhelming, and his own records had documented his crimes in meticulous detail. Their only strategy was to argue for life imprisonment rather than the death penalty, claiming that Bobby suffered from mental illness that should mitigate his punishment. "My client is severely mentally ill and has been suffering from untreated psychological disorders for most of his adult life," Chen argued during the penalty phase of the trial. While this doesn't excuse his crimes, it should be considered when determining his punishment. Bobby Henderson needs treatment, not execution. But the prosecution countered with evidence that Bobby's crimes had been too systematic and sophisticated to be the result of mental illness alone. His careful planning, his ability to evade detection, and his successful corruption of local officials demonstrated that he had been fully aware of his actions and their consequences. Bobby Henderson wasn't mentally ill, he was evil, Prosecutor Martinez argued in his closing statement. He made deliberate choices to hurt children, to corrupt public officials, and to create a criminal network that victimized dozens of innocent kids. His crimes were calculated, systematic, and conducted with full awareness of their horrific nature. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including multiple counts of kidnapping, child abuse, murder, and racketeering. Bobby Henderson was sentenced to death, with Judge Patricia Morrison calling his crimes among the most heinous and systematic acts of evil ever committed in Ohio. Mr. Henderson, you have shown yourself to be incapable of the basic human emotions that make civilized society possible, Judge Morrison said during sentencing. You have betrayed the trust of an entire community, destroyed the lives of dozens of children, and corrupted the very institutions that were supposed to protect those children. The death penalty is the only appropriate punishment for crimes of this magnitude. The other members of Bobby's network received sentences ranging from life imprisonment to 25 years, depending on their level of involvement in the crimes. Michael Thompson, the city councilman, was sentenced to life without parole. Deputy Chen received 40 years for his role in obstructing justice and enabling the crimes to continue. Dr. Wilson was sentenced to 30 years for her abuse of her professional position. Everyone who participated in this conspiracy bears responsibility for the suffering of these children, Judge Morrison noted during the conspiracy trials. You took positions of trust and authority and perverted them to enable the worst kind of criminal behavior. Your betrayal of the public trust is almost as horrific as the crimes themselves. The impact of the ice cream truck killer case extended far beyond the courtroom. The revelations about corruption in Westerville's government led to a complete overhaul of the city's administration, with new officials elected and new oversight systems implemented to prevent similar corruption in the future. The Bobby Henderson case was a wake-up call for our entire community, explained Westerville Mayor Robert Kim, who was elected after the scandal. We had to completely rebuild our government from the ground up and implement new systems to ensure that the corruption that enabled these crimes could never happen again. The case also led to significant changes in how law enforcement agencies investigate missing children cases. New protocols were implemented requiring multiple investigators on missing children cases, regular oversight of investigations, and mandatory reporting of suspicious patterns or potential conflicts of interest. The Bobby Henderson case taught us that corruption in child protection systems can have deadly consequences, explained Ohio Attorney General Patricia Wilson. We've implemented new safeguards and oversight mechanisms to ensure that law enforcement officials who are supposed to protect children can never again use their positions to enable predators. The 3 children who survived Bobby's captivity have received extensive medical and psychological treatment, and while their recovery continues to be a long and difficult process, they have shown remarkable resilience in rebuilding their lives. The survivors of Bobby Henderson's crimes have shown incredible strength and courage, said Dr. Patricia Moore, who continues to work with them. They've endured unimaginable trauma, but they're working hard to heal and reclaim their lives. Their testimony was crucial in convicting Bobby and his accomplices, and their courage in coming forward has helped prevent other children from becoming victims. The families of Bobby's victims have established the Marcus Thompson Foundation, named after the first child to disappear from Bobby's neighborhood. The foundation works to educate communities about the warning signs of predatory behavior and advocates for stronger protections for children. We can't bring back our children, but we can work to make sure that other families don't have to go through what we've experienced, said Linda Thompson, Marcus's mother and president of the foundation. Bobby Henderson was able to hurt so many children because our community trusted him without question. We need to teach people that predators often hide behind friendly faces and positions of trust. The foundation has also worked to support the families of the other victims and to advocate for improved investigation protocols for missing children cases. Their efforts have led to new legislation requiring enhanced background checks for anyone working with children and mandatory reporting of suspicious patterns in missing children cases. As our investigation into the ice cream truck killer case concludes, Bobby Henderson remains on death row at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, where he continues to maintain his innocence despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Prison officials report that he shows no remorse for his crimes and continues to view himself as a victim of law enforcement persecution. Bobby Henderson represents the worst kind of predator, someone who uses society's trust and goodwill to victimize the most vulnerable members of our community, reflected FBI Special Agent Martinez. His case reminds us that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades, and that we must remain vigilant in protecting our children from those who would harm them. The ice cream truck killer case serves as a stark reminder that predators often hide in plain sight, using positions of trust and authority to gain access to their victims. Bobby Henderson's decade-long crime spree was enabled not just by his own cunning and manipulation, but by a system of corruption that prioritized protecting the predator over protecting the children. The Bobby Henderson case changed how we think about child safety and community trust, observed criminal psychologist Dr. Torres. It showed us that the people who seem most trustworthy, the friendly neighborhood vendors, the respected public officials, the helpful community figures, can sometimes be the most dangerous predators of all. If this incredible story of betrayal, corruption, and the ultimate triumph of justice has moved you as much as it has moved us, please like this video and share it to help raise awareness about child protection and the importance of questioning authority when something doesn't feel right. Subscribe to Shocking Stories for more investigations that expose the hidden darkness in our communities and remind us that the price of safety is eternal vigilance. Remember that protecting children is everyone's responsibility, and that sometimes the most trusted faces in our neighborhoods can hide the darkest secrets. Bobby Henderson may have fooled a community for 10 years with his cheerful facade and colorful ice cream truck, but the courage of survivors and the dedication of honest law enforcement officers eventually brought him to justice. His story serves as both a warning about the dangers that can lurk behind friendly faces and a testament to the power of truth to overcome even the most elaborate deceptions. The sound of ice cream truck music may never again bring pure joy to the children of Westerville, but their community's response to this tragedy has created new protections and awareness that will help keep other children safe from predators who try to hide behind masks of innocence and trust.